record starting now. And I'm going to make Tia the host. Manage participants. There's Tia. I'm going to make Tia the host. Do you want to change it? Yeah, and I did. Now I'm going to stop my video. And Tia, it should allow you to become host.
Hold on just a moment. I don't see. Okay, this is not. Okay, wait. This will stop other screen sharing. Do you want to continue? Yes. I don't see my. I guess I'm not seeing the screen to pull up.
There we go.
Oh, okay. Do y'all see it now?
Go. Yes.
Yeah. Okay. I couldn't find it.
Yep, we see it.
All right, good. Oh, I'm sorry. All right. Are y'all ready?
Yep,
Yes.
Good morning, everyone.
Good morning.
Good morning. Hey, went somewhere.
All right. Are we
All
good?
right. Yeah, we good. A European organization decided to implement a technology project to make its services more effective. Changes were connected to a new IT system to enhance work processes and practices. Organizational processes public employees retirement. The organization processes public employees retirement application. The organization employs 500 employees. All right. Next.
James, we lost you.
I'm here. The average age of employees is 48 years old. Many employees were not technology savvy. Levels of education is as follows. 10% hold a postgraduate degree. 25% are university graduates. 60% have completed upper secondary education. And 5% completed a 6-year basic education. So the background of the company that was given.
All right. The central problem that we found was a lack of leadership and direction during the poor implementation of a new IT system. And because of that, we had a lack of trust between the management and employees. We also had a lack of buy-in from the union, which led to implementation barriers. Some of the secondary problems that we encountered was the huge delays because of the union has started blocking the way in collecting vital information and data, resistance to change, which is first seen as direct or indirect refusal for cooperation, and also employee inefficiency in the use of technology. There was poor change history in the organization, and of course, lack of training and professional development. And then the HR department was too small for the organization.
All right, let's note those last two bullets. Let me write those down.
Okay.
Before you move on. Okay, thank you.
All righty.
Alternate solutions. 1, create transparent change plan that includes input from all departments. Ensure it starts with leadership and addresses previous downfalls and mistrust, as well as benefits of new change to everyone. Develop a system for advancement based on work performance. Create support through strategic planning. Develop union. It's getting.
We lost you, James.
I'm here. Develop training outlets for employees that are differentiated and cost effective.
Okay. All right, with transformation, I'm sorry, go ahead, James.
Transformation planning. Definition. Transformation planning is a process of developing a strategic plan for modifying an enterprise's business processes through the modification of policies, procedures, and processes to move the organization from an as-is state to a to-be state.
All right, and when we look at change management is the process, Change management is the process of obtaining the enterprise or business intelligence to perform transformation planning by assessing an organization's people as well as its cultures in order to determine how changes in the business strategies, organization design, and the structure, processes, and technology systems will actually impact the enterprise or the organization.
Okay, hold 1 second right there on that one.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, thank you.
All right. Now, when we look at the present state and how we're going to move from the present state to the future state, we looked up and did some research on organizational change management. And the discipline of organizational change management, or OCM, it's intended, of course, to help move the organization's people, processes, and the technology from the current as-is state to a desired future to-be state. So it is a critical component of any organization or enterprise transformation program. It provides a systematic approach that supports both the organization as well as the individuals within as they plan, accept, and implement the transition from present state to future state. And then when we look at the resistance feedback and how it occurs in 3 dimensions. When we look at the cognitive dimension or cognitive resistance, we're really talking about perception. So how do people view the change? How are they going to handle the perception of others? Because we know that perception is your reality in a sense. So that's the cognitive resistance. And when we look at emotional resistance, we look at how you balance your emotions during the change. And your emotions actually focus on your behavior. So when we look at emotions, that can in itself hinder change from happening. So when we go to behavior resistance, we're going to combine and look at the cognitive as well as the emotional. And you look at the different idiosyncrasies of that change. And we look at gestures, body language. So all of that impacts the resistance to change.
The preferred solution we came up with was creating and implementing a change plan that engages staff in using a new software system and technology. So some of the risks to preferred solutions, because they weren't buying into the changes, I guess it would be to figure out a way to get them to buy in, because they were blocking everything that the organization was trying to go forward. The union was blocking their just blocking everything. I'm sorry, lost for words. Individual resistance is that everybody was used to, especially the older people, the older workers, they were used to doing things the way that they did it, and they weren't interested in learning new things such as technology. The organizational resistance, change saturation, whereas everything is, there's too many things that's going on. Nothing is sound. You have managers leaving and not implementing anything. So the employees that have been there for so many years, they're used to that. So it's kind of like they're happy at running things the way that it's, or they're happy at the way things are going, because they're so used to change not being implemented. A lack of user adoption, and that just goes back to they're not interested in learning. Even the computers that's sitting on the desk, they're not interested in turning them on and learning them. Legacy of failed change. There is a legacy of managers coming in trying to implement and nothing happens. And then stress and confusion and fatigue, which it has caused. So that is a risk to the preferred solution, is that they are stressed, they're confused, they're fatigued. The legacy is that everything has failed over time, so it's going to continue to be that way. So next slide, please. This picture is a picture of where you can look at the top, and it's kind of sort of like they are buying in, or the morale is high. And then when you look at the bottom, who wants to change, you see how the morale goes back down. Sources of resistance to change. To your left, you have the selective information processing, which is under individual resistance. So I kind of spoke on that. Fear of the unknown, the economic factors, security, and habit. The threat to establish power relationships is within the organizational resistance. Threat to expertise. So you had a new person come in, for instance, and things that were done within 6 months, she was able to get done within 1 month. So that was a threat, because they told her, listen, you're not going to do that again. You need to go back in 6 months. We don't get things done that quick. So that was a threat. Group inertia, structural inertia, all of that falls under the organizational resistance that's going on within the organization.
So when we looked at an implementation plan, we kind of followed this 5-step process. Each areas that I'll discuss will kind of fall under one of these, starting with looking at scope, creating the vision, driving commitment, establishing the infrastructure, and then looking at how they need to sustain the change. So I'm going to go into each one a little bit more. Go to the next slide. This is a model that we reviewed just to compare the different factors. And then, so our first step, looking at the implementation plan, one of the things that we looked at doing would be a readiness assessment. And really with the readiness assessment, you're looking at how all the different components of the organization are ready to implement it. So you need to look at leadership's, both their buy-in and their abilities, looking at the union, that should say union, looking at staffing needs, so who can do what needs to be done or what additional staff are needed, looking at technology needs, which is just really the basic platforms that are available or useful to be able to make things happen, and then any professional development or training needs. We would want to consider how ready they are for each one of these categories first. So here's an example of some of the questions we could ask as part of a readiness assessment, looking at the external environment, mission and strategy, leadership, and the culture. And so we don't have to go through each one of these, but some of these questions would really be able to drive coming up with readiness assessment questions to really see where the organization is. So our second part of the action plan would be to define the scope. And with the scope, we really need to know what are our goals with implementing this project, what are our timelines, both with kind of the milestones, but also the long-term timeline, cost for each piece of the milestone, and then what are we really wanting to achieve at each of those milestones or at the end of the timeline. So our key indicators are those targets, which might be percentage of staff know how to use the system or able to be more, to an X amount of efficiency by such and such time, or maybe breaking down the project into different areas that they would learn. Once we determine the scope, then we have to really look at how to drive commitment. And this is the biggest piece with this particular organization, because as the others mentioned, have staff who are not at a place where they want to move forward, whether it's a competing interest of they just don't want to learn something new, or they don't feel like they have the time, or what other factors might be kind of the underlying reason. So we found this guide to kind of deal with resistance for the organization and different factors that they could use around communication, senior management really showing the way, and it's starting from the top, using emotional intelligence and having staff participate, making sure that we're listening, really getting involved. So it has to be the CEO, the leadership, and we can't have we expect all the lower levels to do this without really having buy-in and understanding from the top. Then we would want to be able to focus on solutions, but have realistic goals. We can't expect someone it's at like a 10% capacity for a new system to be at 90% within a really short period of time. So we have to be realistic in what our expectations are for what they need to learn. And then having middle management supervisors be involved in understanding the why behind the change, even if they don't necessarily agree with it, at least knowing the why might help them understand this is what we have to do, even if they wish that they wouldn't. So we would really utilize this to get the buy-in and get the commitment, and wherever the union would fit in, we would want to start from the beginning with them. So we'd spend a lot of time on working through the resistance and getting the commitment before we'd move forward. Then so like I said, we would work with the union to get buy-in. And then once we are at a place where we feel like we have that buy-in, we would establish the change infrastructure. So we would determine what are the actual tasks or plans that would have to be put in place to get to where we want to be, which might be a training plan for staff. And then once we have that plan in place and really have implemented the change, we would want to focus on that freezing of the change, which would be about sustainability. So determining maybe a sunset provision for reviewing progress, looking at like after action reviews, and reviewing outputs and efficiencies to really determine, did the system or did this change really give us what we had hoped it would? And if not, then they would have to really reevaluate, but hopefully it would give what we wanted and it would sustain the change that we had hoped for. And those are our references.
Very good. Very good. Questions? Okay. Do we have any questions? Comments? Okay. Let me review a few things here. The kernel of truth. The kernel of truth in all organizations, regardless of what the change you're trying to implement is, the kernel of truth is it's all about the people. You can't escape that. We have these notions that we can just throw technology at it. Automation, we can overcome with technology. No, it's always about the people, always. That's the kernel of truth in organizations. And if you can't get to that as a consultant, we're talking about from the consultant's perspective here, if you can't get to that, you will not be successful, and the company that you're trying to lead through the change won't be successful either. So Two of your bullets on the slide, one of them was lack of training and professional development, and the other was a too small HR department. That wasn't by accident. If we go back and we look at the 4 types of colleges when we talked about that, that's very similar for organizations as well. It actually, all organizations, I just use college as the model, as the vehicle to talk about that. This is a patronage organization. This is a classic example of a patronage organization. It even has a union. And so the reason why they don't have an HR department is they don't go out and find people who and plug them into their organization based on their skill. And they don't keep people based on their skill. It's a patronage organization. They keep people based and promote them based on seniority, and they bring more people in based on who they are, their union members or relatives or whoever. And the organization is a patronage organization, which means it's fundamentally flawed when you start talking about outcomes. The point of a patronage organization is not outcomes. It's just jobs. Let me say that again. In a patronage organization, the organization doesn't care about outcomes. It's only about providing jobs and job security for those who have them. That's a competing interest with outcomes. The notion that you can just tell people in the organization, we're not doing well, and they will understand and agree with the need to change, no. No, you can tell them, look, we're not making it financially. We're getting killed in the court of public opinion, whatever indicators that show that you're failing as an organization. The notion is when we tell people, it's just about getting the word out. If we tell people, they'll buy in. No, not in a patronage organization, because people weren't hired for their skill. They're not retained because of their skill. And so outcomes don't matter. The notion that if you just tell people that we're failing, that people will buy in to change because we're not being successful. Not in a patronage organization, not in a union. Not in a union shop. Not going to happen. So I think Sarah hit the nail on the head. When you're talking about transformational leadership, transformational leaders have to inspire and motivate. So it starts with transformational leadership. And of course, the professional development piece has to come along with it. Negotiating with the union, those kinds of things. But in the end, what appeared to be a simple, we've just got to computerize, we've just got to mechanize, we've got to modernize, that won't fix your problem. We have to transform the culture of this organization from one that's a patronage organization to a customer service organization. That's our challenge here. And the first step in that is to make sure that you have transformational leadership, the people who aren't a part of the union, that you have to have transformational leaders in place that understand, inspire, and motivate so that you can do the professional development with them. But the kernel of truth is it's all about people. Systems won't fix your problem here. As they've tried before many different times to modernize their systems. But again, the notion that if people know how bad things are, they'll understand and agree with the ability, with the rationale of fixing it, not going to happen. You got to change the culture. And that goes back to transformational leadership, the need for transformational leaders in key positions in the organization that you get to hire. And going back to Collins, they've got too many people on the bus that don't need to be on the bus. And you've got to work professional development to the point where you can let them go. If they can't change, don't have the capacity, you've got to be able to get them off the bus. And that's what transformational leaders do. Let's move on, and I've got a document that I'm going to show you at the end today. Hopefully will help explain that. Who's going to go next?
You are.
Yeah, who's going to be the host?
I will.
That's Chelsea.
There we go.
Oops, I'm on the wrong side. Okay. Ready?
Okay, Keisha, you're up.
Good morning, all.
Good morning.
Chelsea, can you change to the next
Good morning, Chelsea.
Good morning, Pumpkin. Oh. So cute. Hello?
All right, we're ready.
Keisha her picture is frozen. She may have lost service.
Yeah.
Uh-oh.
Are you on there, Keisha? Let me text her right quick. I'm gonna let her know she's not on. Okay, she's not responding.
Okay.
Looking over this, do you think a lot of the stuff is pretty much the same?
Unmute yourself.
Thank you. My connection went out completely. I don't know why, but it did. But I'm back. Did you all begin covering the background slide?
No, we were waiting on you.
Thank you kindly.
Yes, ma'am.
So, I won't spend a lot of time on the background slide because we covered it with the last group. Can you move to the next one? The central problem. We decided that the central problem was that there's an immediate need for transformational leadership with a balanced approach.
Yay.
And the problems were that we said pressures for change are being felt, but there is little follow through. These change-related pressures come from many sources within this organization: an aging and unwilling public sector workforce, resource constraints, technological breakthroughs, increasingly complex public problems, salary increases based on years of seniority and who you know versus the value of service attributed by the employee, contributed by the employee.
Our alternative solutions were that change promotion be performance-based, offer employees incentives and or salary increases for completed degrees based on their position and performance, provide training to supervisors and implement training leads per each department, restructure the organization based on needs and employees' level of abilities, and this is to include leadership roles and responsibilities. Our preferred solution was to restructure the organization based on needs and employees' level of abilities through a well-balanced approach. This is to include leadership roles and responsibilities. The risk to the preferred solution. Some employees may not be a good fit for the organization due to the inadequate level of abilities. So going back to Collins, getting the right people on the bus. Some people need to get off the bus. Some people just need to move seats.
That's correct.
During and after restructuring the organization, there may still be resistance to change from some employees.
Okay, so some of our recommendations, we wanted to come up with a theories of change approach. And there are two theories that we read about in the perusal articles, theory E and theory O. And one of the things that we talked about is sometimes people think when they come into an organization, they can just offer potluck meals, offer some kind of group building things, and then all of a sudden we're going to change the culture. But it has to be more than just those types of things, which they are helpful, but you need to have twofold. So that's a part of the theory O. And then the other one is the theory E, which is the hard approach, which focuses on creation of the economic value. So on this chart that we have, and I won't go through each one of them, but they give you the dimensions of change, what theory E would look like, what theory O would look like, and then your best case scenario is when you have both theories E and O combined to try to make changes in your organization. So the dimensions of change are goals, leadership, focus, process, reward system, and use of consultants, which would be our role if that is our goal in life. Okay, so next slide, Chelsea. Also in one of the articles we read is the 6 steps to effective change. So that's what we're going to go through to see if we can create this culture of change. So the first thing, if you'll go to the next one, Chelsea, the first action of plan for implementation, the 6 steps, the first thing is to mobilize commitment to change through a joint diagnosis of business problems. So we thought we could conduct a SWOT analysis because that'll tell us what we're working with. So we want to know what are the weaknesses in here, what are our opportunities and what are our threats, so we can move forward to see what we need to do. We need to see what can be changed and what must be improved. Okay, the next one, Chelsea. Number 2 is to develop a shared vision of how to organize and manage for competitiveness. You need to define new roles and new responsibilities, because it's like no one has a role or responsibility. People are all over the place. Next one, Chelsea. Okay, so what we came up with, and this can be fluid because in this case study, there were very few people in there that had a name. We saw that John was a person, and we would want this to be fluid if we were really consultants, because we want to work and, like Chelsea said, put the right people in the right place on the bus. So John was over one of the biggest administrators groups. Then we have Julie, the lone person in HR. We have a lady named Jackie, and Jackie was the one that came in and went in and kind of did the job quickly, but they wanted her. They came back and told her, don't do this again because we just need you don't do it again for another 6 months so we can blame other departments. And the one thing that Jackie found, and this was a point for putting people on the right bus, they went out and hired Jackie, but when Jackie started talking to the other people, she could see that those people were very knowledgeable. So it could be that they're not using the people that they have effectively, because she went to them after only being there 2 weeks. They gave her something to do, but technically she had to go to the people that were already there to get information. And then I put a star by, well, I did Jackie too, but I put a star by Nick because he was one of the people, he was in logistics, and he was one of the people that said it's about time for change. So it's almost like those three people, you know for sure, they're going to be on your side possibly to try to bring about some change in the culture. Okay, next one, Chelsea. Okay, foster consensus for a new vision. This is step 3. Foster consensus for a new vision, competence to enact it, and cohesion to move it along. Once employees have bought into a vision of what's necessary and they have understanding of their what they're supposed to be doing, it helps, and you can help create a new vision. You take the time to meet with people as individuals, because one of the things in the beginning of the case study, they talked about how they just had this great grand meeting thinking, oh, this is going to be good. We're going to tell them about this change and everybody's going to be excited about it. Well, it was just the contrary. Okay, next one. Action plan for implementation. For this one is number 4. Spread revitalization to all departments without pushing it from the top. Sometimes you kind of have to, it's almost like a trick play. You have to make people think that they're really leading the change, but you're at the top leading the charge. You have to give people buy-in, because technically you have one body with many members and everyone should be on the same page. One of the things they said, you can stay there, Chelsea. One of the things they said is that you need to give the departments the autonomy to find their own way. And this is where you can kind of add in the incentive portion of this. Give them some incentives from the top. Hey, if you all can get this done, then we can do this. Everything doesn't always have to be tied to money per se, but maybe it could be, I know some people are not big on incentives, but it could just be, you know, giving a shout out through email saying, hey, this group did this. We're proud of them. Thank you for doing this. Or, you know, go back to those potluck dinners saying, hey, we created this. Let's come in today and let's celebrate. Those kind of small things. It doesn't always have to be tied to money, but saying thank you sometimes goes a long way. Okay, Chelsea. Number 5, institutionalize revitalization through formal policy, systems, and structures. And this is the thing where it says the new approach must become entrenched in the right people in the right places to do changes in structure and systems. And basically this kind of deals with your time piece. You can't do this too soon. If you do, you're going to destroy everything that you've tried to do. So you just have to put processes in place and let things take its course. And 6, which is the last one, monitor and adjust strategies in response to the problems in the revitalization process. It's kind of like having a checks and balance. Don't let things, it's just like teaching kids. If you keep teaching them the wrong thing for an extended period of time, it's hard to go back and fix what you taught them. So this is like a checks and balances. Make sure you have stuff in place, but keep checking on it. So if that's not working, monitor it and fix it. Or if you find something that's working, keep moving with it. And basically what I just told you about those 6 steps, that is a way for renewal without imposing it. The vision has to align with the core task. So basically, you let people think that they're actually making the change. Don't always, even though you have to monitor it from the top, let them be a part of what you're trying to do. And those are our references.
Excellent. All right. Questions? Comments? All right. So transformational leadership is the answer here. Excellent job identifying that. So what you're really looking at here is a best practices model. Well, Dale, what's a best practices? Well, you've got to identify people like you did with Nick and Jackie and the other one who are exhibiting best practices and what you want. And so you have to ID these adopters. You have to identify them through observation, evaluation, walkthroughs. You have to identify who those people are. And they're the people who spread the change in the transformational leadership model. Can't just be top down, as you said in your slides. These people have to lead from within. And there's got to be some autonomy in departments. And you have them work on best practices as departments. And one of the points in transformational leadership is it can't be tied to money. There has to be, you have to incentivize people. Now, in the public school business, what I like in that one is that you reward your people who display best practices with leadership roles within the organization. Goes back to Todd Whitaker. Those leadership roles in ascending order of importance or responsibility are, teach other teachers, be involved in the leadership team and the school leadership plan, be involved in curriculum, be involved in budget, and the holy grail is be involved in personnel, hiring more people. You give people those increasing roles of responsibility as a reward for exhibiting best practices in the job. So I promised you a model of this in real life now. The vehicle that I'm going to use is it can be used in most any organization, nonprofit, but I'm going to use a school model because we have a lot of school people and people understand school. So here's a model that I developed in working with schools that need change that aren't performing well. So let me go back here, reclaim host. I'm the host now. Share my screen. All right, so let me pull that up right quick. I call mine MTSS for teachers. You know, in the public school business, we have a multi-tiered system of support for students. I use that same terminology for the plan that I developed for working with employees. This is a transformational leadership model where what we're looking for in terms of best practices in school is Marzano's 9 high yield strategies. That's our technology. That's the technology implementation that we need to make to relate to this particular case study. And we realize that we have to use all the tools in our toolbox. We have to use in terms of professional development. We have to use whole group, small group, and one-on-one coaching. Now, who provides that whole group, small group, and one-on-one coaching to improve the best practices of our workers? Well, it's the workers themselves. It's the Nicks, it's the Jackies, it's the people that we identify in the best practice model. That's the heart of the best practice model that you folks just pointed out. We've got to identify those early adopters, the people who are using the best practices in our organization. We use them to spread it through our organization. Now, as you said, in a transformational leadership, we have to have the correct type of leadership. You know, in a union shop, we still get to hire our supervisors, our leaders, and we have to get them trained. And then we use them to spread our best practices model or our transformational leadership model where we inspire and motivate. Again, it can't be about money. And in the school business, we reward again with those school-wide leadership positions. But in this model, we base our professional development on what's needed, not just we don't do a one-size-fits-all model. When we're looking at individual things that we want folks to be competent in, we have to separate them out, and we have to do whole group for the entire group. But then we have to work on individual competencies that we want our best practices that we want our people. We can break it down into small groups and give them autonomy to work on individual best practices. And then we've got to break it down even further where we have, the employee that exhibits the desired best practices, working one-on-one with the employee who doesn't. So Linda Darling Hammond is kind of the professional development expert. And her sermon is always, you have to customize this. You have to use varying levels of whole group, small group, and individual one-on-one in a transformational leadership model where you're trying to lead organizational change. You've got to lead from within. You've got to identify your best practice people and use them to spread those best practices. That is the transformational leadership model, inspire and motivate. Can't be external motivation through money. And so the work itself has to motivate people. In the end, it goes back to Hertzberg. You know, the leader can't be a satisfier, but can be a dissatisfier. That in successful organizations understand that folks have to find value in the work that they do, and you have to lead them in that change. So if we go back and look at the learning objectives of this case study to help you understand causes of resistance to organizational change, to realize the difference among cultures, especially in change context, to evaluate the role of unions in change. So to realize differences among cultures, this is a transactional organization or is involved in transactional leadership. It must be changed. The culture must be changed to a transformational leadership model. And part of that transformation, or the heart of that transformational leadership model, is to use the expertise of some of the people in the organization to spread that change. Again, the truth is, it's all about people, and you're trying to spread change, and you're trying to change the culture of your organization from one where it's a straight transfer. You know, I work, you give me money, to the work has value. This notion that if we just tell people what bad financial or political shape we're in, they will see the change. No, that won't motivate them to change. We have to change that top-down leadership style to where we're using people in the organization and rewarding them for using best practices. That's kind of what we need out of this one is this is about transformational leadership. How you change the culture in the organization to allow you to implement the actual change that you need, which is technology. You can't just put a computer on everybody's desk and say, well, that was easy. You need a fundamental change in the organization's culture from one that's transactional to one that's transformational, from money to value in your work. That's hard in a union shop. Goes back to Collins. You may have some people that can't make those changes, but if you put them through that process, as you can see down here, in the end, you can let people go. I mean, that's the whole notion here, is that people who can't or won't change to the best practices that you need, the whole idea is we're going to give you so much support that you can't fail unless you want to. And if you do, then we'll have to move you on. And even unions understand that if you have a process and people can't adapt, that we have to have new folks. And that's what this action plan is about, this NTSS model here. But in the end, we put you through whole group. We've had you work in autonomous groups. We've given you one-on-one support. And at the end of that, if you still can't or won't make the desired change to the best practices that we need for the organization, then we'll have to get somebody else on the bus. But you've got to have a plan, and it can't be a secret plan. It's got to be up front. People have to know that outcomes matter, and that we can't continue in the current state, that change is not optional. But in the transformational model, you use people the ability of the people that you have, and you have faith that people, if we lead them properly, inspire and motivate them, that they have the ability to change. And in the end, if they don't, then we have to find somebody else. But again, this one is a clear objective: modernize, computerize this business. But it wasn't as simple as just going out and buying the right hardware and the right software. We knew what that was. This was about getting the people to change. And again, in organizations, it's all the truth. The kernel truth is it's always about people. Technology just won't fix your problem. We think it will. We think if we introduce a new system or new software or new hardware, that will solve. But the people won't change. All right. Questions about this morning? Anybody have anything for the good of the group?
No, sir. But Dr. Lamb, how long will these recordings be available to be accessed?
They'll always be in the shell, and you'll always have access to the shell.
Okay. Are they in black? I mean, they'll be in Blackboard, because I thought Blackboard wipes out every year.
Not always.
Okay.
I thought that as long as, for me, as long as the cohort is still with us, I still have access to their shell.
Okay.
And I thought it was the same
last year, because you all are rolling over from the old Blackboard to the new. That might be.
I think that was it.
Okay.
But it should be there going forward.
Okay. Thank you.
All right. Other questions that we have? Anything for the good of the group?
No questions.
All right. We made it in an hour today. All right. I'll post the video later today as soon as it processes. I will see you folks. When we're going to get together again?
Yeah, when are we meeting?
I think it's the weekend of December 8th, right?
That's correct. That's correct. And so I'm looking forward to seeing all of you. And we'll do something special for Christmas.
Sounds good.
Potluck.
Well, he already does potluck.
We can do potluck, or we can. I was hoping that maybe on Saturday we could go out as a group to lunch. Maybe go over to Ruby Tuesdays.
That'd be nice.
Does that sound good? We do our little Christmas get together there.
Yeah, that sounds good.
All we have to do is just eat, and I'm pretty good at that, so I won't even have to prepare for that. All right, so we'll go to lunch on Saturday. Now remember, this is all about this is your weekend to dazzle and impress. So I'm so looking forward to it.
Hey, just to throw out there to those that haven't signed up, we had kind of talked about creating a spreadsheet of just for us to all sign up so we on target. So if y'all hadn't gone into the one I shared, please go in there in all 3 sections.
All right.
All right. Thanks for doing that.
All right.
No problem.
Y'all have
All
a great rest of your weekend.
Everybody have a good weekend. I'll see you in December.
All right.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.